All right, so okay. Yeah, so the topic we are discussing this evening is IFRS 8 operating segment. So I told you that this topic came out last night, about 15 marks question, it's just like a bonus to me, in my opinion. So you will judge for yourself. By the time we are done, you will judge whether what came out last night was a bonus or not. All right, so let's define an operating segment. So before we define operating segment, let me give you an examples now. Okay, for example, if you look at Dangote Group, okay, Dangote Group. So under Dangote Group, we have various divisions. First, there is Dangote Sugar, right? There is Dangote Salt. There is Dangote Flour. Which other one again? Remind me if you know. Then there is Dangote Sugar, Salt, Flour. What else again do we have for Dangote? Very soon, refinery is coming. Let's say Dangote Refinery. So, and so on and so forth. So, this is example of Dangote for Cadbury. Cadbury also. Cadbury also, we have the one that produced the Bonfita. Okay. Bonfita, the one, those that produce the sweets. Okay. I think, what else again? They produce Maggi too, right? I think Cadbury produced Maggi. I don't know the brand, but they produce so many things. So, now let me stop here now. So, for Dangote now, as a group on its own, so each of these now, like sugar now, sugar generates its own revenue and also incur its own expenses, correct? That is sugar. The same thing goes for salt. Salt is also a separate line of business that generates its own revenue and also incur its own expenditure. Then Dangote Flowers too is another division on its own that also generates its own revenue and also incur its own costs. And each of these divisions, they have their separate production line, and also they also have their separate customer base, correct? So that is how it works. Each of them have their own separate production line and separate customer base. So Cadbury can decide to say that, okay, in my FX, I want to show the product line of sugars performance separately. Let's say the performance of salt separately. Let's say that of flour separately. And so this is exactly what is referred to as an operating what? A segment. So operating segment basically is a division or a unit in a part of an entity that generates income and also incur its own expenditure. So let's look at how the operating segment, what I've just shown you now, just like a general overview. So let's look at the operating segment now, according to IFRS 8. So IFRS 8 defines operating segment as a component of an entity, okay, as a division or component of an entity that engage in business activity from which it earns its own revenue and expenses. Okay, it's a component of an entity or a division that engage in business. Okay, it earns its own revenue and also incur its own expenditure. Just look at this division for this group, for example. Now, we can call sugar a separate operating segment because sugar generates revenue and also incur its own expenditure. Correct? Then we can also call salt a separate operating segment because it generates revenue and also incur its own cost. So there are many multinationals like that they have different group or different line of business within their group, and each of the line of business are distinct in terms of their performance. Okay, so we can measure their performance separately and also they generate their own cost. So this is a very good examples of what operating segment is all about. So it's a division of an entity or a department that or a component of an entity that generates its own revenue and incur what expenses. Then the second definition states that whose operating results are regularly reviewed by CODM. CODM is what? The chief operating decision maker. Okay. That is that particular segment, their results are regularly reviewed by the entity chief operating decision maker to make decision about resources to be allocated to the segment and to assess its performance. So this particular segment, the results are constantly reviewed by the entity top management lines. Okay, they always review this performance every time. They are so much interested in it, and also for which discrete financial performance is available. So for that division, you can estimate its performance when compared with the other division. So you can estimate the performance of that division when and compare it with others. So like now, Dangote can decide to show the P&L of sugar alone to see how the sugar line of business is performing. Dangote could decide to show the P&L for salt, that of flour, because okay, that is this distinct financial information is available. So this is how operating segment was defined according to what IFRS is that operating segment is a company of an entity that engage in business activity from which it earn revenue and incur expenses. Watch out for this. It must be able to earn its own revenue and incur its own expenses. That's number one condition. And number two condition is that whose results are regularly reviewed by CODM, that is the Chief Operating Decision Maker. So they constantly review the reports of that particular segment, and also a discrete financial information is available. That is, you should be able to know the performance of that segment. What is the P&L from this division? So you should be able to determine that. So that is exactly what operating segment is all about. Now note that if this standard basically is applicable to those entities that are publicly quoted, that is PLC. So if you are not a PLC company, it's not compulsory for you to use IFRS 8, but you can decide to follow it to follow it is optional for you, right? But if you are a PLC, then you are mandated to apply IFRS 8. But if you are not a listed entity, you're not a PLC, it is optional, okay? You can decide to follow it or not. It's optional, but if you're a PLC, definitely you need to report your segment according to IFRS 8 operating segment. Okay, so now let's look at, there are some things that we need to discuss. Okay, so let's take the quantitative threshold first, then we'll now look at the reportable segment. So another thing is that it is not all segments that you need to report. So before you can report any segment, there are some conditions that such segments must fulfill before that segment can be reported in the financial statement, so that you don't just report no constraints, whatever those that are not necessary. It's only relevant things that you should disclose in your financial statement according to IFRS 8. So there are some thresholds for you to disclose anything. You must follow those thresholds in order to be able to disclose any operating segments in your financial statement. So there are basically three thresholds, right? Three things that must be followed. The first one is on your revenue, your reported revenue threshold. Okay. The second one is your reported profit threshold. And the third one is your net asset threshold. So the first one is your reported revenue threshold. The second one is your reported profit, and the third one is your what? Is your asset. So on the profit, what the standard says on the profit is that the total profit from that segment, both external or inter-segment sales, should be at least 10% or more of the combined revenue of the entity. So that means if Dangote want to report sugar now, sugar should be able to generate at least 10% or more of the total revenue of Dangote. But if sugar is generating less than 10% or more, if sugar is generating less than 10% of the total revenue of Dangote, then you cannot report sugar. It is too small. So for you to report any segment, this segment must contribute at least 10% or more of the total revenue of the entity. So that is the first thing that you need to know. The segment must contribute to at least 10% or more of the total revenue of the entity before such segment can be reported. So the first condition is that the segment must contribute at least 10% or more of the total revenue of the entity. So that's the first threshold. Then the second threshold is on the profit. So the segment must contribute at least 10% or more, at least 10% or more of the profit of the entity. So that means there are three conditions. The first one is on your revenue, right? Then the second one is on your profit. Okay. The second one is on your profit. And the third one is on your net asset. So one of these must be present. One of these must be what? Present. So the second one is your. So it's not compulsory that a segment qualify for all the three. The standard says that the segment must meet any of the following threshold. So is it that the revenue is up to 10% or more, or profit is up to 10% or more of the total profit, or net asset is 10% or more. So if one of these conditions is fulfilled, then you can report that segment. Let me repeat it. So this revenue from that segment must equal to at least 10% of the combined revenue of the entity. Then the second one is the profit from that segment must equal to at least 10% or more of the combined profit of the entity. Then the third one is the asset or the net asset for the segment must equal to at least 10% or more of the combined assets of the entity. So this is how you report a segment. So if your segment tick any of these three boxes, then you can report that segment in your financial statement according to IFRS 8, correct? Okay, now, so it is also possible that there are your segment, let's say here for sugar, we have about, it is also possible that your segments are not up to 10% and still you want to report them. I will tell you what to do shortly. Now, so this is the threshold for identifying segment, right? To know which segment that you must disclose. So you have to, the segment must meet any of these three conditions, right? So what is a reportable segment? Reportable segment basically means the aggregate of all segments that you want to disclose in your FX. Okay, the aggregate of all segments that you want to disclose in your financial statement. So what the rule states is that the total segment that you want to disclose must constitute at least 75% of the entity's revenue. So the total revenue of all the segments that you want to disclose must not be less than 75% of the total revenue of the entity. So let's assume that you are disclosing segment sugar, salt, flour, all of them. Let's say sugar alone is about 20, salt alone is about, let's say, 25. Okay, 25%, right? Salt is 25%. Let's say this one is, let's say, 30%. So by the time you add up all this now, this is, no, don't let me make it absolute. So by the time you add up this now, this is about 80, right? So this is a very good example. So you can disclose this three segments because by the time you combine their total revenues together, it is equal to at least 80% of the combined revenue of the entity. So all segments to be reported in your FX, the total revenue of those reportable segments should not be less than 75% of the entity's total revenue. Now, the next question now is this. Let's now assume that this is what we have, that this is 15 and this is 30. Okay, so this gives us about 50, 65. So let's assume that this is 65 and the standard says that we must disclose at least 75%. No, let me say, let me add 8 here. So this should be 73, right? This should be 73. And the standard states that we must disclose at least how many percent? 75%. So the standard now recommend that you can also merge two or more smaller segments together for you to be able to achieve this 75% threshold. Now, let me repeat myself. First of all, you must identify your reportable segment. How do you identify reportable segments? That is, if segment meets any of these criteria, those are the segments that you must selected, right? Now, all your reportable segment, everything that you have identified, the standard said that the total revenue from all segments that you have identified should not be less than 75% of the combined revenue of the entity, right? So that's the second criteria. So let's now assume that you did not meet up to 75%. So the standard now states that you can identify those smaller segments too, and you can merge two or more segments together. But for you to be able to merge two or more segments together, there are some conditions that you must follow, right? There are some conditions that you must follow. So before I discuss those conditions now, so in this case now that we have about 73%, okay, so what the standard now states is that after you have done all this, you should identify the nearest operating segment. Even if such segment do not meet up with 10% formula, you should identify any closest segment then so that you can achieve your threshold of what 75%. So that's the clause here. So if this here it states that if the total external revenue reported by operating segment constitutes less than 75% of the total revenue, then additional operating segment must be identified. So additional means that you identify those nearest operating segments. Okay, additional operating segments must be identified as reportable segments. People are joining, and I'm trying to add them. Additional operating segments must be identified as a reportable what segment, even if they do not meet the criteria until 75% of revenue is achieved. So you keep you identify any nearest operating segment just for you to achieve the 75% threshold. So this is exactly what makes up your reportable segments. Okay, so I will still recap all this point. Now, before I do my recap, let's now explain how you can merge two or more smaller segments together. So the standard states that you can aggregate, you can combine two or more segments together to form a single segment. But before you can do such, before you can combine two or more operating segments together, they must have the following in common. Okay, they must have the following in common. E.g., you want to merge sugar and I mean you are selling milk, you're also selling tea. You are selling milk, you are also selling tea. So you might decide to okay, let me just report both of them as a single operating segment. So you can do that if those segments have the following in common. The first one is that the nature of the product and services are similar. If the nature of the products and services of those segments are similar, then you can combine, or the nature of the production process too are similar, or the type of customer or class of customer for those products are similar. Like the same set of people that will buy tea from you are the same set of people that will also buy milk from you. So you have similar customer base, or if the method used to distribute their product or services are similar. So if all these things are similar, then you can merge two or more operating segments together. I hope I'm communicating. So before we move on to the Q&A, I want to do a summary together again, because once you get this thing once and for all, that is the end. Okay, you just need to understand it once and for all. So I want to do a recap for 5 minutes, then we'll move on to case study, question and answer. So we started by defining operating segments, okay, as a company of an entity that engage in business from which it earns revenue and also incur its own expenses. That is, you should be able to identify the revenue and expenses of that segment, or the results are regularly reviewed by the chief operating decision maker. And also, such segments have discrete financial information. That is, you are able to identify the P&L of that particular segment. Then the next thing we now did was that what are those quantitative threshold for identifying an operating segment? So I explained the 10-10-10 rule. It is called 10-10-10 rules. So the first one is on so every operating or every reportable segment must meet any of the three threshold, not all, at least one of the three. So the first one is that the reported revenue from such operating segments must equal to at least 10% or more of the combined revenue of the entity. Okay, revenue from that segment alone must equal to at least 10% or more of the combined revenue of the entity. The second one is that the profit from that segment must equal to at least 10% or more of the combined profit of the entity. The third one is the net asset of such segment must equal to at least 10% or more of the combined asset of the entities. So this is how to identify those segments in piecemeal. Now, what you need to disclose in your FS, according to IFRS 8, is known as reportable segment. We now say that your total reportable segment must not be less than, the revenue from the total reportable segment must not be less than 75% of the combined revenue of the entity. It must not be less than 75% of the combined revenue of the entity. And I'll say that if the total of all your reportable segments is not up to 75%, then the standard allow you to identify those smaller segments and add them up to make sure that you achieve at least 75%. So once that one is done, then you are safe. Then the last thing I explained was how to combine two or more smaller segments together. I gave an example of milk and tea. So you just might decide to just combine them together because they have a lot of things in common. So these are the conditions for aggregating two or more operating segments into one. So these conditions must be followed before you can aggregate. Okay, so I hope I'm communicating. So I'm done with the standard. The next thing for us is to take case study. So guys, am I communicating? Do you understand before we move on to case study, please? I need feedback from you guys. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Standard. Okay, it is very clear, right? Good, good, good. So now we can
Understood,
move
sir.
on. Thank you for the confirmation. Oh, okay, when I was explaining Dangote, I've missed out. Someone mentioned spaghetti. That's one of Dangote's products. Well done. Okay, I just saw the shaft now. All right, so now that we are done with this. No, sorry, let's take a question now. So let's try to create some scene as if we're in the class. Somebody should read the questions for us, please. Someone should read these questions for us.
The following information relates to Oakwood, a quoted company with 5 divisions of operation: wood, furniture, Brenner, waste, other, and total. Then revenue from external sales from customer, intersegment revenue, reported profit, and total assets. Then the question: which of the business divisions are reportable segments under IFRS 8 operating segments?
Thank you so much. All right, so before you solve something like this, don't just jump and say, oh, reportable segments are this. You need to first of all give some preambles. Okay, you give some preambles. So let's start solution. So the first thing you will do is you define operating segments. They are not asking you to define, no, but this is a professional class. You are not in skill. So don't just jump. You need to give some preamble. That will give the examiner more confidence that you truly know what you are doing. So define operating segment. Though these are segment, this. When you define a segment, define what is a quantitative threshold. Quantitative threshold. Those three conditions that must be fulfilled, right? When you explain those three conditions: 10% of profit, 10% of net asset, and 10% of revenue. When you define that, tell them what is a reportable segment. Oh, that is, the segment must meet up with at least 75% of the combined revenue. And if it is not to 75%, then we should identify the smaller segments and now combine them, right? So once you have done all that now, the solution itself. So this solution now, you need to do some workings. Your workings will come, this will come as appendix, right? Your working will come as appendix. Your main solution is just like this. You define this. Then you now refer to the appendix to explain how you arrive at the solution. So let's start now. We have wood, furniture, vinyl, waste, and others, right? Let me use Microsoft Excel for this. Let's use Microsoft Excel. Okay. So the various products we have are what? Wood, furniture. Please call them for me. Wood, furniture.
Furniture,
Okay.
veneer, waste, and other sales.
Veneer, waste, and others, right? Then we have total, correct? This is exactly what we have,
Yes, sir.
right? So the next thing for us now is to do the analysis. So we know there are three analyses that we need to do. One is revenue analysis. Okay. The second one is your profit. Oh, this is our analysis. So we need to do revenue analysis. The second one is the profit analysis, and the third one is the net asset analysis. So for revenue analysis now, we know that the total revenue is how much, please? They have 650 from revenue from customer, right? 220 from wood, 256 furniture, vendors. So the total revenue here is 650, Abi. Hello, it's 650, right? Then we also have inter-segment revenue. Inter-segment revenue is 48 altogether, right? So that means the total revenue is 698. Do you agree with me, please? Do you agree with me that the total revenue is 698? Is that
Yes,
correct,
sir.
please?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
so total revenue is 698. So if you want to know the percentage of wood on total revenue, that will be 258, correct? Divided by 698. Am I making sense? You know, wood is 220 from external customer and
Sir,
38
please,
from
can you come
inter-segment.
again? Can you come again?
I should come again, right?
Yes.
Okay, you know that
Yes, sir.
you guys can unmute so that we'll communicate, we'll flow together. You just unmute, please. Everyone. So the total revenue, you agree with me that it is 698, right? The 650 is from the revenue from external customer. Then there is 48 from inter-segment revenue. Is that clear to everybody?
Yes, yes.
The total revenue is 698, right? Then
Yes.
for wood alone now is 220 and 38. Do you agree?
Yes.
So wood is 258 divided by 638, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank God.
Yes, sir.
So now wood is equal to 258 divided by 698, Abi.
Yes.
Okay, so this now you multiply it by 100%. So that's about 37% for wood. Do you agree with me?
Yeah.
I want to increase my funds.
Yes, sir.
Do you agree that this is this correct to everybody?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
give me for furniture. Furniture is how much now?
Yes,
tell me. Tell me on your own.
Furniture is
256 plus
258
2.
divided by
That's 258 divided
698.
by 698.
258.
698.
258
Over
over 698, Abi.
698.
Yes.
Okay, how much is this now?
Yes, sir.
The same. That's 7%.
Let me do one thing. There should be something to
The same with
separate them. Okay. All right. What about Vena? 62, Abi.
62 years.
2 over
62 divided by 698.
Then what about waste? Waste is how much?
60.
6. Yes.
60.
Yes. Over 69.
Okay. Others. Others is 60 also.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
All right. So the total should be 100%, all team being equal, right? All right.
Yes,
So
sir.
can you give me the figure for profit too? We need to do the similar things for profit. Profit is simply 54, Abby, divided by 130 for wood. Can you give me the for profit? Do you have the question with you?
For
Yes.
furniture
Yes,
is
sir.
34%.
Okay, profit is 34%, Abby.
Yeah, for
Wood
furniture.
41.5.
Which one is
For
41.5?
Wood is 41.54.
so the furniture is 34.6%.
Oh yeah, call others. Call Vina for me.
Vina is 9.23%.
Then what about waste?
6.92.
Then others.
Others is 10%. 10%.
So everything should be 100. Ultimately, oh yeah, do for net assets too.
Others is 7.69. Others 7.69.
Somebody is using purple calculator, Abby.
No, 7.69% for others.
Okay. Oh yeah, call the net asset analysis for me.
That's
Net asset analysis.
wood is 48.04.
Okay, furniture.
40.19.
40.
40.19. That's furniture.
Okay.
Others 5.88.
5.88%, Abby.
Yes.
Okay. Then these two. Hmm?
Vena 1.96. Venia 1.96.
Then the last one, 3.92%.
All right. Thank you very much. So from this is like this one will come as your workings. Oh, hey, what did I press? This, sorry, I pressed something. Okay, this will come as your workings. Okay. Now, it's not just about these workings now. The most important work is how to analyze this thing now. We have done some jargons here, correct? We have some jargons on the screen here. So your mark will now come from how do you analyze these numbers that we've done now. So looking at the principle that we discussed now, who can tell me the reportable, what are those segments that we can identify as reportable segments here?
The first two segments are reportable, which is wood and furniture.
Wood and furniture.
Okay, now you have been able to identify wood and furniture because they meet up with the 10-10 principle, Abi.
Yes, sir.
Now, if I add up wood and furniture, it is not giving me 75. Oh,
Then we take Vena.
It is giving me 73. So what is the next step I'm going to take? What is the next
Vena.
step? Why are you taking Vena?
Because it's the closest, like
Hmm?
it has more value, like more numbers than the rest.
It is the nearest, Abi. It is the nearest
yes.
to the among the remaining three. The highest, the one that has more value, like you rightly said, is Vena, Abi.
Yes, sir.
So if you take Vena now, the total is now giving us 82.1, correct?
82.8.
So we are already above the threshold. So that's the solution. So these three are your operating segments. Sorry, who doesn't understand? So we are going to convert this into solution now. We are going to write some notes now. So, but who doesn't understand this analysis before we start drafting our notes? Is it clear to everyone, please? Who doesn't understand this analysis before we start drafting our notes? So I want to believe it is clear to everyone.
I joined late. I didn't understand.
From where to where? Oh, you joined late. So what I will advise you, because we've actually done quite a while. So what I will advise you is just listen to the recorded version. You'll be able to catch up, correct? Because I need to go back from the beginning, and we've done quite a while. But lucky you that the class is recorded. So you can always, but still don't give up yet. We still have more questions to solve. So maybe when we are solving the next question, I can explain as I'm solving the next question. So back to solution now. You now say based on appendix 1, right? The reportable segments are what and what? So let me add this. The reportable segments are what and what, please?
Wood, furniture, and
No,
venue.
wood. 36, Abby.
Yes.
36 points. What? Oh, 36.96, right?
Yes, 36.96.
Wood and furniture, Abby.
Yes.
Furniture is
36.96.
36.96, right?
Yes, sir.
However, so let me use the word the identified segments are, however, the summation of the two segments is about 73 or something percent,
73.92.
which does not equal to the minimum threshold of 75, Rabbi.
Yes, sir.
So therefore,
Yes, sir.
additional segment needs to be identified, which is what?
Brother.
Needs to be identified as which is Werner, right?
Yes.
So therefore, so the total reportable segment of what's the name of Oakwood are wood, wood furniture, and Werner. So this is exactly how you need to answer the question. Oh. So let me take you back again. So the solution, the first thing I did was I defined my operating segment for the examiner. If you define it like this, the examiner head because of us scatter. Then I explained the quantitative threshold to the examiners. Then I also define what is a reportable segment. Then I now review my workings, right? That based on appendix 1, the reporting segments are as follows. So if you are able to present your solution like this, if the total allocated mark is 15, you should be able to score 13, right? You should be able to score 13 at minimum. So that is the solution to the first question. So let's move on to last diet. I told this question came out last diet exam, question number 7. So let's take question number 7, last diet now. So somebody should please read these questions for us. Last diet question number 7 is on the screen now. I want someone to read for us.
Findface.
Okay, continue.
FF Limited produces and sells its range of body care products through 3 separate divisions. In addition, there are 2 laboratories which carry out research and development activities. In the first of these laboratories, the research and development activities is funded internally and centrally for each of the 3 sales divisions. It does not carry out research and development activities for other entities. Each of the 3 divisions is given a budget allocation which is used to purchase research and development activities from the laboratory. The laboratory is directly accountable to the divisional heads for this expenditure. The second laboratory performs contract investigation activities for other laboratories and body care companies. The laboratory earns 75% of its revenue from external customers, and this external revenue represents 18% of the organization's total revenue. The performance of the second laboratory activities and the three separate divisions is regularly reviewed by the chief operating decision maker. In addition to the head of divisions, there is a head of second laboratory. The head of second laboratory is directly accountable to the chief operating decision maker, and they discuss the operating activities, allocation of the resources, and financial result of the laboratory. FF Limited is uncertain as to whether the research and development laboratory should be reported as
Okay.
two separate segments under IFRS 8 operating segments. Required. Advise the directors of Findface Limited on this issue.
Okay. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So this is a question now. Findface. Okay, I think this one is referring to all the ladies in the class. All of you are pretty beautiful. So the question is for you, saying that Findface Limited produces and sells its range of products care through three different separate divisions. In addition, there are two laboratories. So you can see there are two laboratories. In the first of this laboratory, the research and development activity. So the examiner states that we should do what? Advise the director of Findface on this. Okay, they said that here, certain as to whether the research and development laboratory should be reported as two operating segments under IFRS 8. So advise the director of Findface on this issue. So ladies and gentlemen, solution. My concept is still the same. First of all, define operating segment, first of all, before anything. After you have defined operating segment, explain your quantitative what? Quantitative
The threshold.
threshold. After you have done this, then explain reportable segment. Then now advise the management. This is how you should go about the solution. I think this is about 7 marks. When I'm done solving it for you, I will want us to review the ICANN solution before we call it a day. I will solve it for you, then we'll review the ICANN solutions together, right? So you follow this step. So let's assume now that you have done step 1, you have done step 2, you have done step 3. Now let's advise the management. So they said that Findface, look at this last paragraph here, colored now. Look at this last paragraph, that Findface is uncertain as to whether the research and development laboratory should be reported as two separate segments under IFRS 8. So there are basically two research and development and laboratories. So this is the first one. They said that in the first of these laboratories now. So I want to read now. You will now tell me whether this qualified as a reportable segment or not. So let's read now. Let's read. So I think everything from here to here is about the first laboratory. Am I correct? Are you guys following?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's
Yes,
read
sir.
it now. They say in the first of this laboratory, the research and development activity is funded internally and centrally for each of the three sales divisions. It does not carry out research and development activities for other entities. Each of the three divisions is given a budget allocation, which is used to purchase research and development activities from the laboratory. The laboratory is directly accountable to the divisional head for this expenditure. So this division, do you think we can report it as operating segment or not? Remember, the definition of operating segment is that it must generate its own revenue and it cure its own expenses, right? The second one states that it's something that must be regularly reviewed by the CODM, right? Chief Operating Decision Maker. And the third one state that we should be able to have these things financial performance. So can you tell me, based on those three, this division, does it qualify as operating segment or not? I'm waiting for your response, please. Does this qualify as operating segment or not? Does this qualify as operating segment or not? Hmm? Oh, yeah.
No, sir.
Does this? You said what?
No.
Explain why.
No. No.
No. Oh yeah, explain why you said no. Oh, I heard a kid voice now. Where is that? Let me grade the child now. Let me grade him.
Good evening,
Madam,
sir.
good evening. Is your okay? What's his name? What is it? He or she?
She.
What's her name?
Mildred.
Oh, greet her for me. Oh.
Mimi, sir.
Good evening.
She's laughing.
Which type of snacks does she like most?
Oh, she likes meat pie.
Okay, don't worry. I will send you to her on Saturday. Okay, I'll send it to her on Saturday. That's FCA. She's an FCA. That's future chartered accountant, hopefully. Please remind me. I'll send it to her on Saturday. All right, let's get back to our solution. So is this yes or no? Does this qualify or not?
The first one does not qualify.
It doesn't qualify. Oh yeah, explain.
Yes, the first one does not qualify because they are giving budgets like allocation to it to operate. Then the second one qualify because it earns more than.
No, we are not at the second one first. Now let's finish the first one.
Sorry,
the first one.
sir.
So the first one, does it qualify or not? What is our consensus?
It doesn't, sir.
Okay, so in a nutshell, the first one does not qualify because number one, it doesn't generate revenue. They just depend on money from somewhere to run your business. So it does not generate, it's not the distinct. It's not distinct. It depends on other people for money. It's not that it's able to generate its own revenue or not. If you look at our definitions now, the first one does not qualify as operating segments because it's not a distinct segment. It still depends on other divisions for budget allocation. It doesn't generate its own revenue or whatever. So that is a clear no for the first one. But what about the second one? Does the second one qualify? Does this second one qualify, please?
Yes, sir.
Yes, it does.
Why did you say yes?
Because
in fact, there are a lot of points here, Abby.
It generates over
about
10% revenue for the
It earns
organization's total revenue.
This one is like a expo for all of you. They've given you everything that you need. It generates revenue. It also incurs, so it's also being reviewed by CODM. So your solution is that the first one does not qualify as operating segment, while the second one qualifies. So that's the advice to the management on this. So that's how you advise the management. Now, I think let's review this question. I'm not going to just go through it. Read it, go through it. If it's something you can undo, otherwise I will just leave it for you. It's same thing with what we have just done. Just like here, you have a lot of figures to press. There are plenty of figures here. Oh yeah, somebody should read these questions for us.
Jafuwara PLC is a publicly limited company that trades in 6 business areas, which are reported separately in its internal accounts provided to the chief operating decision maker. The result of these segments for the year ended 31st December 2021 are as follows. We have Chemical Africa, rest to the world, pharmaceutical wholesales, pharmaceutical retail, cosmetics, hair care, and body care. Then required, draft a report addressed to the directors of Jafuwara PLC, advising them on which of the operating segments constitutes a reportable operating segment for the year ended 31st December 2021 in accordance with IFRS 8.
Okay, thank you. Who is at the entrance? Let me admit Kenny. Just coming and going every time. Okay, so let's review this now. So look at this now. So in this case now, this is the result. So we need to analyze. Sure, you're analyzing three things. Number one is your revenue, right? Number two is your profit, and number three is your assets. Forget about liability. This liability is just a distraction for you. So there are how many divisions here? We have chemical one, pharmaceutical retail, cosmetic. There are about 6 divisions. So the only trick here is that for chemical here, you know, what we say is the global income, global transactions. So what you will do for chemical is that the 28th year that is for Africa, you will combine the two together. Rest of the world and Africa, you add them up as one transaction. So for chemical, it will be 28 plus 112 divided by the total is actually okay. So for chemical now, the total revenue here is 384 plus 92 because you are combining both the external and its internal sales together. So chemical is 384 plus 92. That's the total. You can just, I will explain it to you. Please solve it and snap your solutions to me. I will just confirm if you are right or wrong. Okay. So for the total revenue for this area line of business is 384 plus 92, right? So for chemical, you are going to add 28 plus 14 plus 112 plus 6. The total answer that you arrive at, you divide it by 384 plus 92, right? You will divide it by that. Then for pharmaceutical wholesales, you will add up 118 plus 16 and divide it by 384 plus 92 to get that percentage. For pharmaceutical retail, is 44 plus 0 divided by this total sales is your total sales, both the internal and external. So that is how you will be able to arrive at the percentage for revenue. Oh, sorry, it's even don't need to even. Why am I even wasting my time, sir? They've given us total now. See it here. Am I correct? Hello, guys, are you with me?
Yes, sir. They've given us the total figure already.
Why am I cracking my brain? So for chemical now, just say
42 plus
118 divided by 476, Abi.
Yes.
Pharmaceutical wholesales, 134 divided by what? 476, Abi.
Yes.
Pharmaceutical resale, 44 divided by 476. That's how you calculate your revenue. Case closed. Therefore, your profit or loss, you also follow the same pattern. For your asset, follow the same pattern. So it is when you have gotten this now that you will now check which of these segments meet up with 13%. Then you will now advise them that these are your just the same way we did just the same thing that we did for the previous question. So you analyze it like that and advise them that these are the reportable segments. The question I'm reviewing is just last direct question. No? You can see how simple it is. So do you all understand this before we review the ICANN solution, please?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, we do.
Okay, let's check I downloaded the solution earlier today. So yeah, I downloaded it. So let's review the ICANN solution number 7. So I want you to understand how they also solve it. So I'm going to number 7 now. Okay, now look at it now, number 7. That A part now. Did you see what it did here? The first thing they did was all this story here, they tried to define operating segments. Just the same thing I told you. They define it as operating segment that IFRS state that an operating segment is a component of an equity which engage in business activities from which it may earn revenue and it incur cost. In addition, discrete financial information should be available for the segment, and these results should be regularly reviewed by the entity CODM when making decisions. So we have defined operating segments too. So in their own solution, they also listed the 10% rule, right? So those are the keywords. You don't need to go through to write it exactly the way they wrote their own. No. Just follow the keyword I'm telling you. They try to define the keyword exactly the same way we explain it, the quantitative threshold. So after that keyword now, then they now advise the management. So look at the note 5 now. They said that as a result of the application of the above criteria, the first laboratory will not be reported as a separate operating segment. Just the same thing that we agreed at in our conclusion, that the first laboratory will not be reported, that only the second laboratory, you can see, the second laboratory should be reported as a separate segment. It meets the quantitative threshold for percentage of total revenue and other criteria for an operating segment. So it's just the same thing that we did that they also align with here. So for the B part now, they repeated the same stories too. They defined the operating segment, they listed the quantitative threshold. Then for each of the division now, they are now advising whether they have met with the criteria or they did not meet with the criteria. But however, before you can arrive at this decision, you must have done that your workings. So let me take you to their workings. So see the workings they did now. So that was the same thing I told you. That was exactly what they did now. So they follow the same formula. You too, if you analyze it based on what I said, you should be able to arrive at this same percentage, right? So it is based on this percentage that you should arrive at. So if you look at this now, we only have chemical and what? Pharmaceutical wholesales. That chemical qualify, right? Pharmaceutical qualify, correct? Then the body care, 17%. Body care also qualifies, right? So I don't know if you add up these three. If it does not equal to 75%, then you can add pharmaceutical retail. Are you with me, please?
Yes.
Yes,
If
sir.
you do, if 33, 28 plus 17 does not equal to 75, then you can add pharmaceutical retail. So just let's note it.
It's over 75.
38, 23, and 17 is over, Abi.
Yes.
So that means those are the three. So chemical, pharmaceutical, wholesale, body care. Those are the three. Let's see. Chemical. Okay, they say it meets. Pharmaceutical, so wholesale also meet all the criteria. Then retail does not meet, right? Pharmaceutical retail segment is not separately reportable as it does not meet the criteria. It can never be about the segment if the management believe that the information about the segment will be useful to the user of financial statement. This is optional, right? The minimum is 10%. Cosmetics too is the same thing. You can see body care meet. So it's just the same thing that we just did now that they also try to solve now. So my advice for you is that you can go through what they have done. It's not different from what we have done in the class, but your own solution may not be as detailed as this. So just try and note down those key points I've told you, and you should be able to earn your full mark here. It's about 15 marks questions. So this to me was like a bonus last diet for them, for those that sat for the exam. Because there is no way you will solve that first question and you will not be able to attempt the second questions. Anyway, so that's just it. So this was last diet question number 7, right? You can download the Pathfinder from, or I will share this Pathfinder to your WhatsApp group now. You can download and review the questions on your own, okay? Then also to class notes, let me stop recording. I'm done with the class. Today's class notes too. I sent it to your WhatsApp group earlier just few hours ago this evening. I